take your show through the moment and have some impact come out.
It can feel overwhelming, like, oh my goodness, where do I go from here?
You got to make sure you're bringing it to life. That's your job.
Yeah.
You know?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think these last couple of weeks we have going on here in the season, I think we're going to really prove everybody's worth and what they're doing and kind of what they can bring to the table with the kids and the show and the full production of things. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to End Zone to End Zone, our podcast from Synced Up Designs, talking about pageantry-related goodness. Going to speak to the educators, the students, and everybody, and just overall try and lift up everyone who's participating in the pageantry arts. Try to make everyone more successful. For everyone who's at this point in the season, if you're getting ready to go into regionals and championships, then congratulations for getting this far. You've really done most of the hard part. Truly. So pat yourself on the back. And even though this is one of the most stressful times of the season too, I think it's important to recognize everyone for how good they're doing, all the hard work put in, and everyone's growing through this. So hopefully we can give you a few good nuggets of wisdom to make your last home stretch here of your season really successful. Mm-hmm. So one of the first things we wanted to talk about is your show. What are some things that are probably common scenarios for this point in the season for a high school with their indoor show?
I think a good common scenario would be you've got enough music on. It's not quite as clean. The moments aren't vertically produced for your vertical moment to project the way that you want it. Maybe you got a really good pace show, but those isolated moments really aren't speaking or popping the way that you wanted to. And I think now's the time of the season where you kind of got to trim the fat around it. And make sure that those isolated moments really speak more clearly than everything else around it, so it can be identified as a vertical moment. Too often, groups will get to playing and they run through what we call a run-on sentence as far as a phrase goes, and they get to the end of it, but they've all loved that moment when they wrote it, when they thought about it, and the whole jazz. But when they see it, they can almost visually see what it's supposed to be versus what it is.
Right.
And I think that's a common problem that a lot of us get into is you want it to be seen like how you produced it or how you imagined it, but it's not quite produced as vivid for everybody else to understand with the amount of clarity that you had when you first started. So
right.
That's just always going to be a struggle, and I think it's one of those things where people have to really dive in on what's important and then really hyper focus on that moment and think about all the details that go into it. It might be a quiet moment where you really need to clear out all the extra noise that's going on. Maybe it's a super focused moment where it's the full ensemble. It's also a struggle when you have everybody together and there's not a clear, it just sounds ruckus,
sure.
Right? So I think, there's many variables that go into clearing out visual ideas, clearing out musical ideas, clearing out emotional ideas. Sometimes, or focus on what they need to be. Because sometimes music is written to be felt and performed a certain way, which makes it correct in the effect. And if the performers aren't living up to that, then it's just kind of flat lines, right? So we've all seen the shows where it just feels kind of flat. It was like, well, the music might have been performed well, but the execution of it from maybe the neck up or waist up doesn't really communicate that to the audience
Sure.
or the judges. So it just feels flat, right?
So you're talking about communication. I want to back up to a few highlights of what you just took us through. Clarity, combing through and weeding out parts that are not necessary, right? Those are some things you just talked about. Those are tools and lenses you should be looking at your show through. You also talked about if you're the person who's teaching every little detail, I want your hand angle to be like this. I want, the second and third layer of visual performers to have these jobs and of musicians to have these jobs. But certain programs will have someone who sits at the top and observes the whole time. Others, it's the same person running the show who's down teaching the hand angle. So at the end of the day, you have to have that zoom out and look for the clarity of the moment and what's going to communicate to the judges, to the audience, take your show through the moment and have some impact come out. I heard you mentioning basically the relationship of too much clutter, not enough impact. So what is that actually, when rubber meets the road, you're talking about making parts thinner, easier, or even eliminated, much as we all love to see that part go. But
just pretend like it was never written.
That's right.
That's my favorite thing when a student gets a little huffy puffy about their part going. Just try to pretend like it never even existed,
Yeah.
And I think the good thing when that stuff happens is you would just want to remind the student how much they grew learning that part, even though they might not get to perform it. Now it makes everything else a little bit easier, right?
Sure.
So it's never wasted time. So you just gotta make sure you put that on the back end of when you're yanking out their soul a little bit with the music. You gotta explain the growth.
It's good to somewhat take the fall for the students too and tell them all, like, you can keep it real, I think. This sounded a certain way in Sibelius, and now hearing it in a gymnasium, I really need to hear those bass drums right there. So I can't have the bongo part. Or I really need to hear the end of that mallet run. I don't need the sizzle cymbal so much.
Right, and I think there's some tactics people could employ when they're in a full ensemble situation to thin something out. And a lot of it has to start with you just want them to play what you want to hear first. So it might be a melody. Cool, add the melody. Melodies only, right? So medals, maybe synth. Maybe you got something going in the bass line that covers the melody, whatever that is. So everybody's got the melody. Cool, let's hear it. Then you start adding everything on underneath it. And once it starts to clutter up and get in the way of the melody, then you get rid of it. Right. Or you balance it in a way that makes the melody still be a focus. So,
sure.
But a lot of times people they see this and they try to put the whole pizza in their mouth versus like, let's eat this slice at a time.
Right.
That slice. And then eventually the whole pizza will be gone. But sometimes it can be overwhelming when you look at something like that, and it can feel overwhelming, like, oh my goodness, where do I go from here? But really, you just got to start piecemealing different segments and really start dissecting it, and seeing what's ugly. I can say that a lot of times it can be rack players or a drum set player that could be cluttering up the ensemble, and it just might be a volume thing. Timing might be great, but just washy cymbals might be covering up something that needs to be heard. So it can literally be something as simple as that, or it could be something like, hey, quads, don't play this because visually you're not important, so let's not even put you in the musical phrase.
That's right.
To clutter everything up and just, no harm, no foul.
Right. And the audience won't know that it was once on paper there. They're never going to know.
They don't know the struggles that go on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Nor do they care.
That's right.
Or should they care?
They want to go on a ride, have it be enjoyable. They know what clean and dirty generally is, and if an idea spoke to them clearly or if they just were waiting for the time to pass for the next thing to come.
Yeah, it's definitely a struggle to get there, especially if you feel overwhelmed for multiple weeks in a row and not making any progress. I think the challenge is to maybe put all the problem spots in a spreadsheet and then start thinking about dividing up your time in rehearsals between now and the end and like what you can accomplish every rehearsal, and give yourself a goal and a checkpoint so that when you end this rehearsal on Tuesday and that rehearsal on Thursday, you fix 2 or 3 things, and at the end of the week, you feel really good about the first third of the show.
Right.
And then you can set it and forget it. You leave it, and then you move on to the next problems. But until you fix those problems, the worst thing you can do is keep repeating, rehearsing those problems, because now you're reinforcing bad habits. So now you've got more reps in on something that's bad versus what would be good. So it's easier and more promising to do it way sooner. Fix your problem sooner. Even if you think it's going to be dirty or doesn't matter, cram as much on as you can in the beginning, because it's going to get them more reps when they're in sectionals, when they're in a full ensemble of doing the right thing.
Sure.
Versus doing something might not be right or is going to be changed.
Right. So we're kind of telling you 2 things here. 1, don't be afraid to make edits if you're thinning out and creating focus. 2, try to make those as early as possible so you're getting the most reps of what it's going to be.
Yeah, you just got to identify the problem soon.
Right.
And, and that goes with all the top arrangers, because just because you buy a show from someone or you have someone custom make you a show, it's never, ever, it's rarely going to be very perfect for your ensemble on the first get-go. There's always going to be massaging that's needed to fit your students better. It could be some of the visual stuff didn't line up the way that maybe the music arranger wanted. Mm-hmm. So there's some coordinative efforts that's going to need to be implied there just to be able to make it speak better for the effect you're trying to get across. And I think a lot of mistakes people might go through is like they'll hire designers and they bring people in to do it.
Yeah. And
they think that's gold, like that's the answer. And nobody's perfect. So the people there that are teaching and training the members, they need to be able to take that information that might be 90% there and be able to mold it better specifically for their kids. And then don't be afraid to cut something out, because just somebody gave you something doesn't mean it has to be done. One of the things that I used to like to do is do a closed eye test, right? So you can turn around and face the wall in rehearsal just so you're really not distracted. But the point of it is you want to hear it for what it is. Too often when we watch a group, we might get distracted by, oh, they're doing the wrong sticking, or their foot's out of step, or you know, you've got all this friction going on with your eyes and kind of what you're seeing, but you're not really focusing on what you're hearing.
Sure.
So it's better to, if you cut out all the visual and just like hear it for what it is, you can make better and quicker assumptions of what's going on. So it's really about problem solving. And when you take away one of your senses that might be super effective, which is your eyesight, right? Which I had cataract surgery a couple of months ago, which is it fixed that problem for me.
Nice that you finally know who we are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't look like Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head to me anymore, so it's awesome. But having your ears be the hyper focus of that is really what you want to do. And the next thing I like to do is call it the Joe Schmo test, right? It can be a band parent. It could be somebody you just got pulled in from the Circle K or convenience store or whatever.
Yep.
And somebody that, you know, knows entertainment but not necessarily know the activity, and just bring them into a rehearsal and ask them, what are they watching right now for a focus test? And if you feel like they're watching somebody change a prop in the back right while there's a snare feature going on up front, that's a problem.
Right.
Right? So you want to make sure that your focus is dummy proof, and you can bring in the most layman ever for our activity, and they would be able to go, I'm watching that, I'm watching this, I'm hearing this, I'm absorbing this, I'm affected by this. So there's certain things that you can do that take you out of it, because a lot of times, like, some of us might want to design shows for us and our 5 best friends.
That's right.
And not necessarily for the masses.
Right.
So the more you can get to the masses and have them comment on what's going on, then you're going to better serve the community.
Right.
So,
and especially if you're the designer or arranger, but even if you're not, even if you fell in love with the show on a website and then bought it and et cetera, you're going to maybe keep your idealistic version of what you thought it was going to be in mind, but then you're not actually closing your eyes at rehearsal to make sure that that big moment happens musically. Like you got to make sure you're bringing it to life. That's your job.
yeah.
You know?
No, absolutely. But just don't get in your own head so much, you know, because a lot of
Right.
times you want to see it and hear it for what you expect it to be and not for what it is. So as many tools as you can bring in, people isolating parts, and really kind of get to the heart of the matter and really hear it and see it for what it is, that's when you're going to be able to problem solve the quickest.
Right.
I mean, I think a lot of mistakes people will make is like they'll have a bad transition, but they'll pretend like they don't see it, but everybody else sees it. You know, it's like, well, it only lasts 3 seconds. Just get it off the floor.
Right.
Well, those 3 seconds is what the judge is going to talk about for the next 15 seconds while you're doing something really cool. A judge could be faltered or distracted by just the most menial thing. And then now your whole transition. It could be a 30-second transition that's ruined by somebody going behind the prop at the wrong time.
Oh, nothing worse
Yeah.
than having the judge talk over what you want them to really enjoy because of something like that, low-hanging fruit that you could have buttoned up
Right.
with a detail. Hey, on the topic of kind of trimming the fat on your score and getting it to have that customized, perfect difficulty for your kids, why don't you tell them about one of the services we offer at Synced Up for any of our catalog music?
Oh, yeah. We offer free skill set rewrites, and we do adjustments for instrumentation. So if you wanted that oboe in your show, we'd be okay, we'll go ahead and put it in there for you for free. Or if you need to change a trombone solo to a trumpet solo, we can do that. Or if you need a section to be a lot stronger or weaker, we can totally take care of all those adjustments for free. If there's anything that you want to change out a ballad per se, or rewrite an outro or an intro, that'll be a different cost, but everything that is included in our catalog shows is free skill set adjustments and instrumentation adjustments, all for free.
There's 2 ways that this can happen. Number 1 is we'll include the Sibelius and XML file of the music for you. So if you or anyone on your team is savvy with making adjustments in the program, You can do that yourself. If you need us to make adjustments, just let us know. This section is too difficult for this section, and we can do those difficulty reductions for no additional charge. Things that are easy, like changing a trumpet solo to a trombone solo, changing a section that's too difficult and making it easier, we can take care of that for you. Just let us know.
Yep, custom feel without the custom price.
So to kind of recap everything we've been talking about on this side of things with design, looking at your overall design and delivery, keying in on what are the big vertical moments, where is it supposed to pay off for you? You know, most shows maybe you have between 5 and 10, you know, that are like, these are the key things. Every X amount of seconds, I need a payoff to the audience. They need to enjoy that, and then probably one of your transitions happening between payoffs or between ideas and feels. So having that clarity of vision for your own show, and I think that honesty in your ears and in your eyes, not of the ideal you once had when you thought of the show, but like now here we are, what's actually happening. I think ironing all those things out and looking into your show with an honest lens is a great thing for the last month here, and kind of making some decisions. Some of them might be harder decisions than you want, but remember that at the end of the year, you have two major goals. One, that the students had an incredible experience with your program. They want to tell all their friends, and they all want to join again and do it again. And two is that the art piece that you presented to the audience is enjoyed, you know, and that they're not just sitting waiting for the next group to come on, but that you have a little polish and pride, and that those moments happen in order. Kind of switching over to the student side of things. I mean, how many generations of students have you seen go from 8th grade to senior graduating and all that? So like, what are some things you think of about the last month of the season, things you can do to make every student from your brand new beginner to your graduating senior have a great last month?
I think the important thing is to have a quality product, and you don't want to feel disorganized or uncomfortable going into your last month. And if you're just chasing points and scores, you don't want to put that pressure on the members. So some groups are in a place where they're fighting for those tents and they're trying to get a placement or whatever, and that might be their culture, and that's fine, okay? But there's not everybody's a winner, right? But you still want to come out of the season feeling like you're a winner because you had a really well-produced show. So placement doesn't matter to me anymore. It matters like what you're delivering to the audience. And because that is your piece of art, that's your work, that's what you've been doing the past 5 months you're showing people.
Right.
The students are a part of that, so you want to make sure that the students feel at the end of the season like they were a part of that process and they met their end goal. Not they get to the last week and we're still struggling trying to play a role and they don't feel good about it and they've never nailed it and you've never changed it.
Right.
And when you knew about it 4 months ago, they'd never get. So like those type of things that like you want to nip in the bud so we don't have that same feeling in April or the end of March that we did at the beginning of January.
If you could fix the material to be appropriate earlier, it is a far lesser crime, really no crime at all, to have easier material that the kids feel great about performing than to be stressing on them the last week of the, like, come on, that role, you know? I mean,
right.
So I think setting them up with the right kind of thing. Also in the last month is make sure to celebrate the wins. You have to.
And it's not competitive wins.
No, not competitive
like
wins.
Like rehearsal wins.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the growth wins. You know, if your timpani player never got that thing in tune, but now they're getting it in tune all the time, you got to celebrate that. If your vertical moments in rhythm that are happening correctly now that didn't used to, you got to let them know that this is going great.
Yeah, don't just go, that's great, and move on.
Right.
Like, if it's been a struggle and it's nailed now, like, talk about it. And, like, let's do it again and again and again. And that is a big problem that a lot of people do is like they'll get 5 reps and they'll get it right the 5th time and then move on. That's no bueno. You cannot do that.
Right.
If you get it right the 5th time, that means you do it 5 or 8 more times after that. That's at the quality of the 5th one, at least.
Right.
Otherwise, you're not developing the right muscle memory. You know, it's a crapshoot.
Right.
You know,
they just don't have enough experience to be like, oh, we got it once. But yeah, those wins you have to celebrate it and shout it out. I think it is inherent that staffs give commentary and critique. Right, that's what we do. We spend a lot of rehearsal time giving critique, suggestions. That wasn't good enough yet. You could do blank. But it is so important to tell them when they're doing something great because that's going to fill them up with pride, self-confidence, energy, and then. You know what? If you do that enough, I don't think you're going to have to be the staff member begging, come on, perform, come on, make it look like you enjoy it, because they will enjoy it.
Right. I think one of the hardest things that us as educators have to get past is not being such a critic, but also being a coach. And it took me a long time to figure that out, because you want to make the art great. It's art, yeah. Like, I don't care. We got to make it great, you know? And then you realize, like, wait a minute, like, half these kids aren't even going to pick up sticks when they leave high school. Doesn't matter. You know, like, we got to teach them a different kind of lesson.
Right.
Than in there. Like, the music's just part of it, but the other part is just making sure they get out of this correctly, you know, with, you know, all the tools that we can give them, life tools, music tools. Doesn't matter.
Right.
You want to make sure you're giving them all the right things, and coaching is the other part of that. And it's not just critiquing. And when you're critiquing, make sure you provide some analysis on the other side that isn't just, oh, you're doing this wrong. You're actually giving help on the other side and giving a solution.
Right.
Because if you're not a solutionist, then you shouldn't be critiquing.
That's right.
Period.
Yeah.
You know, because nobody. Yeah, you're just a complainer. Who cares about
One
that?
more.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's half percussion and half debate club at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, like, yeah,
exactly.
Like, yeah.
Exactly.
But yes, staffs, tell your kids they're great. They may not remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. It's true.
Yep, can be.
What else? Let's see. End of the season. You are going to probably now go from where you were not getting any feedback, you were in your bubble, and now you're going to start getting judges' tapes and feedback. Believe every word, take it like the gospel, and change everything? Or...
I think there's it depends on where you are in the season, and depends on how confident you are with your arc of the show and where you're going. If you are really confident with where you're going, and you're come out to shows and you're getting comments about, well, this feels unfinished, I'm not really sure of the direction it's going, maybe you should fill in the blank, whatever, ignore it. Like, if you're true to your vision, stay to your vision. And then listen to them for comments about execution, things like that. If you're kind of unaware something's happening, let an extra ear or eye help you with that. But as far as like show design goes, you just want to make sure that you stick to your guns until it's done. Once it gets to a point to where you feel like somebody can critique it and you get feedback, then start to do that. But if you're unsure and you're at your first or fifth year or whatever out and you're still trying to feel the waters and you need help, then start with that dialogue and critique. Hey, I'm not really sure about this.
Yes.
What do you think? And help me out in kind of the direction. Because, you know, a lot of the judges have been designers in the past, so they're going to be able to give you some of that critique if you ask for it. Now, clearly they're not supposed to tell you how to design the show, but at the an open class, there is a bit of mentorship that goes on.
Right.
And it's totally okay to ask that.
Right. So. What you don't want to do is overreact too hard and try and chase a moving target. Like, this judge this weekend said this, I'm going to make all kinds of changes in my rehearsals this week. And then the next weekend says that, somebody else, and I'm... Well, you know, you don't want to be driving a wild car around either, you know.
Right. I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people make is like, if they're dirty, they're going to listen to the judge comments and they're going to make a lot of left or right turns where they didn't necessarily need to. They just need to be clean.
Right.
You know, and that's a big thing that people will end up chasing their tail all season, trying to change design stuff when they just needed to clean their role.
Right.
And it's more of a focus thing on what's important, because what's important is it's clean. I've seen groups go out and literally do barely anything, but they were so much cleaner than everybody else, you had to give them that credit, because that is an effect also.
Right.
You know, and people 100% forget that part of the effect sheet is just clarity. You know, that's pretty much... That's all it is.
Right.
So
if I couldn't understand much of what you were saying, we wouldn't have much of a conversation. And art's subjective. You just at a certain point,
it is super subjective.
You have to be comfortable.
Right.
With that.
And for somebody on the other end of the judges giving me feedback, I just learned to just water off a duck's tail, man. Just let it go. You know, there's always next show, next year, whatever. You know, it's art, like you said, it's subjective, and people just got to realize that that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Competitive art is a little interesting by nature, right? And it is subjective. So if you don't want to ride that bull, don't go to that rodeo.
True that. I like that one. We can end with that.
Okay. This has been the End Zone to End Zone podcast with WGI Hall of Famer Shane Gwaltney and sales manager Dan Twiford.
That's correct.
It's been amazing.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. What else with judges? How about this one? Here's a good one. That one judge who just doesn't get it. Everybody else seems to get it, but they didn't give me a good number. And just don't lose your mind.
Just move on.
Don't lose your mind. Yeah,
Move on.
right.
Who cares?
Next.